Greetings ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jerome Adrian and I welcome you back to my channel. It's that time again, time for another top 10 reasons to play video, and we are taking a look at Guild Wars 2. I've been streaming my Guild Wars 2 leveling adventures over the past month, and together we've experienced quite an adventure. I want to thank you all for joining me in my streams both here on YouTube and on Twitch. Guild Wars 2 was released in 2012, developed by ArenaNet and published by NCSoft. Many at the time of release claims that this was the best modern MMORPG ever made. Bold claims, but do what they say really hold weight, especially if you're new and thinking about playing this 5 years later? That's the question I'm here to answer. So if you've never heard of Guild Wars 2 and are wondering if you should jump in, then this video is for you. For existing players, if you have that one stubborn friend who still refuses to join you in game, know that this video was made to share. Without further ado, here are my top 10 reasons to check out Guild Wars 2 and the world of Tyria. Number 10. Business model. Let's start with the most obvious reason and address the price question. Is Guild Wars 2 free to play? Is there a paywall? Well, if you didn't know by now, the base game for Guild Wars 2 is completely free to play. That means new players can create an account and jump into the core game without spending any money. Guild Wars 2 previously used a buy-to-play model, and today the only thing that you'll need to buy is the expansion Heart of Thorns and the past Living World Seeds and Stories. While free players can literally romp through the game, there are some restrictions in place that are there to simply protect the community from spammers. Trust me when I say this, there's more than enough content in the core Guild Wars 2 experience to help you make up your mind about whether or not you want to continue the story into the expansion. And even then, Heart of Thorns does go on sale. I got my digital copy earlier this year for 50% off, and I'm having a blast with it so far. Number 9. Player convenience. When it comes to player convenience, no one does it quite like Guild Wars 2. There's a chock full of mechanics that takes the petty aspect of management out of the player's hands so they can spend more time and focus on things they want to do. From a gameplay point of view, Guild Wars 2 makes it easy to just focus on progressing your characters and the story. There's no running back and forth to NPC quest givers to turn in quests, so as soon as you're done, you're always moving forward, not backward. Other players also can't kill-steal bosses or mobs, so everyone can openly tag and receive the rewards. Crafting nodes aren't first come first serve either, so everyone can go to town on harvesting materials without the risk of player hostility. And speaking of crafting, I like the way the game handles the acquisition and storage of crafting materials. Every material you receive in your bags can immediately be stored, saving you bag space. Doing so will send them straight to your bank, and it will have a dedicated crafting materials tab that you can access from bankers without needing to buy space upgrades. And when you craft at stations, the Bank and Materials tab will be accessible from the crafting panel itself, ensuring you never need to run back and forth from bank to craft stations. I can't help but feel pampered here. I also like how the game uses an account wallet. All currencies earned in-game are shared across all characters on your account. They do not take any space in your inventory whatsoever and can be easily accessed from your bags. And finally, I have to talk about the auction house, also known as the Black Lion Trading Company. I just can't believe how easy it is to use here. For starters, you can access the auction house from anywhere in the game and can start browsing equipment and consumables to buy. Searching for items is made super easy thanks to the great search filtering system, and you can sort through large piles of items to get exactly what you need. Once bought, all you need to do is visit an auctioneer to collect your purchases. Selling is also bloody convenient. Just open your inventory, right-click on an item and hit sell instantly. Or set a selling price and see if anyone bites. Guild Wars 2's auction house is super easy to use, and you'll definitely feel and notice the difference when it comes to how Guild Wars 2 goes about player convenience. Number 8. The combat system. Combat in Guild Wars 2, in my opinion, is one of the game's strengths. Let's go over the details in depth. The game has 9 classes, aka professions, that have unique styles, training abilities, and specializations, which are traits offering more passive boons. Despite the classes, there isn't a reliance on traditional archetypes as much, such as depending solely on structured groups that needs tanks and healers. Every class is effective at dealing damage, control, which involves stunning and immobilizing mobs, and support, which involves buffing and healing. Guild Wars 2 is primarily a tap target game, and combat animations feels and look excellent. The execution of skills is fast, fluid, and a lot of that is down to how the combat mechanics work. There is an ability bar, and skills in slots 1 to 5 are based on your equipped weapons. Every class can use a few different weapons, which gives you more control over the combat skills in your build, including determining if you're ranged or melee, on top of providing specific skills catering for the 3 categories mentioned earlier: damage, control, and support. Most classes are able to dual wield using different weapons too. A sword in your main hand, for example, grants you class-based sword skills for slots 1 to 3, and equipping an axe in your offhand opens up axe skills in slots 4 and 5. In later levels, you can swap to a second weapon slot to use a two-handed weapon, for example, changing all 5 skills on your bar based on that two-handed weapon, like staves, hammers, and greatswords. Note, however, that there are weapon restrictions for classes, so not every class can use the same weapon or combination of weapons or are granted the same skills. This is also true for skill slots 6 to 10 that can be unlocked through earning and spending hero points in your character's training tab. Each class will have its own training categories that you can unlock new skills in, and players can mix and match these freely regardless of weapons. Later on in the game, players will work towards unlocking specializations, which are passive traits offering a lot of build customization for the player in terms of offering combat buffs, boons, and other beneficial passives. The ultimate progression when it comes to builds for players is to unlock the elite specialization, which requires a bit of effort. The easy part is reaching level 80, but to complete the elite specialization, you'll need a lot of hero points. Needless to say, this system offers plenty of build customization, making the combat a fun experience when leveling. I certainly had fun in my leveling streams, unlocking new trait builds and trying out new weapons to see what the skills do. The combat system is also really mobile. A lot of skills execute on the move, and while some classes have casting skills that requires you to root, they never feel like a hindrance. Moving while fighting is something of a norm in this game, as late game areas are populated with difficult mobs and players must be competent at using all the tools at their disposal, including dodging, to be effective. This is especially true in the Heart of Thorns expansion. When it comes to veteran, champion, elite mobs, dungeon bosses, and world bosses, don't expect them to roll over easily, especially if you're a new player. Expect to be given multiple conditions that you need to use both your weapon skills and training skills to get the upper hand, and look out for what they do. Big AoE attacks will have ground telegraphs that you must dodge out of the way, for example. To wrap up the combat, I will say that I do like the system. Many have told me that they find it repetitive since majority of the skills are available to you from very early in the game, since all you need are the weapons. As you saw in my streams, however, I didn't find this to be an issue for me, but do take that into consideration. Number 7. Graphics and presentation. When I first started playing Guild Wars 2, I noticed that the game has this defined art style and aesthetically it looks unique. As with everything this game does, it has class, and the graphics, artwork, and music incorporates this class. The biggest compliment I have with the game's visuals is that for an MMO, it is its own. It doesn't look like a clone of another game, it just looks like Guild Wars 2. And newer MMOs are, for the most part, based off the style found here in Guild Wars 2, be it aesthetically or in terms of mechanics. For a game released in 2012, the graphics holds up very well. The environments, the setting, the biomes ranging from vast Greenlands to the tropics, and the huge cliffy terrain of Maguma are beautiful to look at, and the game ensures you experience it thanks to its focus on getting players to explore these places and view vistas. When it comes to the finer details such as textures and character models, it isn't going to look as polished when compared to newer MMOs like Black Desert Online or Arcade, for example, but in my opinion, Guild Wars 2 more than makes up for this with the animations of the character models in-game and when it comes to the movement and combat. From a cosmetics point of view, I'm very happy to report that the game does have a pretty robust outfitting and dye system to complement some really awesome armor designs for all classes. Outfits are full body costumes that can be unlocked account-wide, while dyes can be unlocked by consuming dye bottles that drop from various sources in-game. Unlocking a dye is also account-wide, and the best part is that to change outfits or to dye your gear, you can do it right from your hero panel anywhere in the game world. There's no need to visit an outfitter or other NPCs to do this. On top of that, there's an account-wide wardrobe feature available which allows you to change the appearance of your weapons and armor for the cost of transmutation charges. Players can unlock skins for their collections by salvaging weapons and armor, and they will be automatically saved into the account-wide wardrobe. Therefore, you're free to make even your level 10 gear look awesome by transmuting it to a cooler or rare looking skin obtained from your other alts, although I don't recommend doing that, none at level 10 at least. Sticking with the presentation category, let's talk about Guild Wars 2's use of cutscenes and cinematics during the main story quests. In the base game or core game, the main stories makes good use of characters on a stylized art palette that's easy on the eyes. While some may argue that this seems lazy and uninspiring, the story cutscenes and use of cinematics increases in quality significantly in the Heart of Thorns expansion. I love how cutscenes in the expansion takes place within the game world itself and did away with the one-on-one dialogue scenes. You get to watch your character be the main protagonist on the landscape, complete with facial animations of your dialogue cues and those of the NPCs and other story characters too. I find this more immersive and organic than compared to how it used to be. And finally, we have to talk about the soundtrack. The music in this game is fantastic, high quality, and totally befitting a grand MMORPG world. It comes as no surprise that the composer is none other than Jeremy Soule. Love you, Jeremy. Number 6. The stories. And speaking of stories, Guild Wars 2 has 3 main narratives that players can play through. The first is also the most important for players, and it's your personal story. Personal story serves as your main quest in the game and is governed by your character's background selections in the character creation screen, but the story will be continuously shaped by your decisions throughout. Players can start picking up chapters of their personal stories at certain levels, and they mostly play out in instanced areas on the world map. This is done to ensure that you are the center of your own story, without interference from other players in the area or the invasion of monsters from a world event that would muck up the progression of that particular chapter. Initially, I thought the isolation of doing these chapters in instanced areas would feel really weird and lonely, but I've thoroughly enjoyed the story chapters because of it. I find that by experiencing the stories this way, I am fully aware, immersed, and invested in the stories that the game is trying to tell, and the end result is a cohesive experience because of it. As for the story itself, it has a humble and predictable beginning that picks up the pace midway through before turning out to be an epic adventure that lasts all the way through the living stories and the expansion. In essence, and without spoiling too much, your personal story in the core game revolves around stopping an undead dragon that's threatening the world, and to stop it, players must unite the various races and factions to fight as one. I really like the way you experience the change in urgency as the plot unravels, and how the quests and events and zones you move to outside of the personal stories become a direct reflection to the threat within the personal story. Dialogues are decent, the plot is well written and features fully voiced characters that for the most part are likable. The real winner for me is that the game does give you branching choices that matter. For example, pretty early on I had to pick between saving a friend or saving a town full of innocent civilians. Choices are permanent and the game made sure I was aware and experiencing the consequences of my actions. Later on, you will be given more choices that will alter your journey towards the climax, and not all races experience the same journey in the lead up to the big finale too. So there's plenty of replayability, and not a lot of theme park MMOs can offer that in the main story. I'm giving the Guild Wars 2 story a thumbs up. From the outside, it may seem like there's a lot of lore to go through and that you'll be at a disadvantage, struggling to like the story if you haven't played the first Guild Wars game. I thought so too, but really I think you'll be fine if you've never played this. The game doesn't bother you by going into the finer details, throwing deep lore flashbacks and tidbits that won't help players that are new to the series. It gives you all you need to know for a specific point in the plot of a chapter, all the while advancing the main plot because there is a very serious threat that the game is building up to. I started out as a clueless nobody, discovering things about myself, where I come from, and what my character is like as a person. And towards the end, I'm somewhat leading an army against an antagonist that's been there the whole time, building in the background since the very first few chapters. This is great pacing, and if you're a casual player looking for a decent story in an MMORPG, this game offers it and then some more. What's waiting after the personal stories are done will be the Living World Seasons, which is Guild Wars 2's temporary content that continues and introduces new stories, characters, and instances that has brought about permanent changes in the world, hence the name Living Stories. Then there's the expansion that just blows the quality of storytelling out of the water. While players must pay for the expansion, I'm gonna call it right now and say it will be worth your money if you want more story. The second narrative is that of Destiny's Edge, a band of heroes that's tied to the Guild Wars lore, and their story plays out in the dungeons found in the core game. The dungeon stories are decent, also fully voice acted with cutscenes as well. If you've got a group who haven't experienced the dungeon stories, I highly recommend checking it out at your own pace as something to do in between leveling to get to the next chapter of the personal story. And finally, the third narrative is that of the world. Guild Wars 2 as a game world weaves a wondrous narrative of its own, and I know that's vague, but I promise I will talk about that at length later in the video. Number 5. Player Community. I strongly believe that player communities are a cornerstone for MMORPGs, and Guild Wars 2 does indeed have a decent bunch. I leveled up my Revenant primarily solo during the streams, but the guilds that I was in proved to be helpful and friendly. Players can join up to 5 guilds at once, but can only represent one at a time, which simply means which guild name tag your character will wear. Finding guilds is super easy, just ask in chat and you're good to go. Chat is bearable and absolutely comes alive for the huge amount of events in the game. Not everyone's experiences are going to be the same when it comes to the community, however, but I really love the way Guild Wars 2 provides some pretty revolutionary community tools to help foster the game's community for everyone, including the introvert solo players like myself or players at the other end of the spectrum. For starters, the world events itself brings tons of players together without even trying. I love watching players trickle in from all over to share the experience of taking down a huge world boss or completing a multi-tiered event. I like how leaders within the community can turn on their mentor or commander tags, making them visible on the world map so that new players or solo players can join their parties, learning the ropes from them in their group, or just simply tagging along to gain experience or rewards for PvE quests, events, or world vs world PvP. And the game's guild system is probably one of the most comprehensive guild systems I've seen, period. Guilds can earn experience points and gain levels, and in itself is a progression system for players. Guildees can take part in guild missions that earn currency and rewards. Guilds can get enhancements that provides buffs for the entire guild roster, or shared storage and perks including reducing waypoint travel cost, for example. It's such a great way to give guilds not only a place to find like-minded players, but a common goal to work towards as well. And all this information can be found on the Guild tab, which offers more utility tools for guilds. Your guilds can create pre-made teams for PvP, and it will be easy to keep track of their progress or invite everyone to the party with one click. And to top it off, there's guild halls to gather and just do what guilds in every other MMO does: party. I can't believe newer MMOs aren't taking a page out of Guild Wars 2's book when it comes to providing the tools to build and foster a community. I am playing a 5-year-old game for the first time, and I have to say this is some pretty revolutionary stuff. Number 4. PvE progression. Before I begin, I think it's important to say this, especially to newer players who have not played Guild Wars 2. PvE questing and progression in this MMO will be different compared to other MMOs. So if you're jumping in with the mindset of finding traditional quest hub crawls, grinding a whole bunch of quests from one area and moving to the next to get maximum experience points to level up, you are not going to find it. When I first started playing, I made that mistake of expecting that. I wanted a familiar questing system, and from what I've seen and researched, lots of players give up early because it's not there. Guild Wars 2 does have quests with objectives and XP rewards, however, but it's not the only means to earn experience points to level up. In fact, almost everything you do in Guild Wars 2 will earn you experience points. Exploration and discovery of new areas and points of interest, viewing vistas, crafting, unlocking waypoints, completing hero challenges, taking part in zone events, and of course completing hearts. Each zone you play in will have a certain number of hearts, representing NPCs who have objectives for you to complete. This is the closest thing to what you define as a landscape quest. How it differs from other MMOs is that instead of walking up to them to accept a quest and read chunks of a text asking you to perform a chore for a stranger, you're an urgent response to obvious threats, including the dynamic events for that particular zone, which tells a coherent story. So instead of reading about how this farmer needs 10 rats killed to save his crops, you see bandits attacking a village in the distance and you run in to help. The objectives are automatically popping up on your tracker without the need to speak to anybody. It's also non-linear in a way that you can just move between areas, automatically swapping hearts. It feels organic and lets you decide which objectives you'd like to complete on a map first. The interesting thing about these heart quests is that it offers players a lot of flexibility on a macro and micro level. On the surface, completing hearts can be done non-linearly as mentioned previously. You're free to enter any zone and be scaled to level to take on the objectives. Level scaling exists and it's great. Level cap players and friends can join you in the early zones and they will be scaled down to the zone level. So they won't be God mode, one-shotting enemies, which reduces challenge and may suck the fun out of the experience. On a micro level, each heart quest will offer you a variety of objectives that you can do to progress the quest. For example, a heart with a meta of saving a farm could have 3 objectives: dance to a cow, kill some bandits, or root out the worms. You could just do one, a combination of 2, or do all of them to complete the objective and save the farm. 90% of the heart quests are structured this way, which I find really interesting. As for the balanced 10%, well, in later zones and the expansion, there will not be any hearts. So endgame progression at the level cap of 80 will involve a different style of play, revolving around completing world events, PvP, dungeons, fractals, and raids. But really, there is no right or wrong way to play. You just play and the world will do the rest. Number 3. The Gem Store. Hooray for microtransactions! When done right, that is. The Guild Wars 2 Gem Store, the in-game cash shop, is integrated into the game's auction house tab. In there, you'll find mostly cosmetic outfits, skins, miniature pets, and boosters that largely offers conveniences to players. You won't find any traces of pay to win because there's nothing in there that sells anything which would affect a player's stats. What I find interesting is the gem conversions. Players can buy gems with real money and sell them to other players for in-game gold. The opposite is also possible, whereby players can buy gems using in-game gold, although the conversion rate is pretty pretty steep. Still, the option is there should you have very deep pockets and would like to pick up something from the store without spending real money. Just be prepared to grind for gold. Number 2. PvP. I really like the PvP in Guild Wars 2. There is literally something for everyone, and the developers seem to put quite a bit of effort into the PvP, which has created a thriving, fun, and competitive environment for solo players, small groups, and guilds. There are 2 PvP modes in Guild Wars 2, the first being ranked and unranked structured PvP. In this mode, 2 teams of 5 go head-to-head in a variety of match modes such as Team Deathmatch, Conquer, and Stronghold. The second is the much talked about World vs. World, or WvW, where players from 3 different servers or worlds battle in huge open maps. It's open world combat at its best, featuring siege weapons to help your server take on map objectives such as keeps and towers, or battle over resources to win rewards for their servers and world experience for themselves. Both modes were highly enjoyable for me, and in World vs. World I wasn't suffering from lag in the presence of large amounts of players, which is always a plus. What's awesome about PvPing in Guild Wars 2 is that win or lose, your participation earns you XP, rewards, and progress towards your PvP reward tracks. And besides that, all players are skilled up to cap and have access to all of their skills and traits unlocked. You can enter the PvP lobby and start putting your endgame PvP builds together, regardless of your level. In World vs. World, the balance is adjusted slightly, but the intention of the developers to put everyone on a level playing field is there. In short, PvP here is about skill and experience and not about who's got the best gear. This eliminates a problematic grind that other MMOs tend to have, the issue of grinding PvE gear or PvP gear in order to be effective. Some of the PvP mechanics are pretty great too. For instance, when you defeat players, they don't die instantly. You have to manually kill them off with stylish finishers, and there are plenty of unique variations available. This totally beats the old school corpse jump. Down players, on the other hand, has a fighting chance to survive if they manage to kill an enemy player or survive long enough. I have the most fun in structured PvP. It's easy to jump in, have a few fights, and jump back out. I also like that there's PvP leagues and seasons, so if you're a hardcore PvP player, there's some long-term progression here for you to achieve. And come on, there's even a Guild Wars 2 World Championship esports competition for structured PvP. Besides 2 other MMORPGs going the competitive esports route, can any other say the same? Number 1. The World. I strongly believe that there are 2 main characters, the main rock stars in Guild Wars 2. The first, of course, is your main character, as it should be. You are the driving force. But the second and perhaps the most important character in this game is the world itself. Yes, the world. The game world is the best example of a living, breathing world within an MMORPG. When you're not on the usual content hunt to progress your personal story or trying to rank up in PvP and World vs. World, trust in the game world to lead you on an adventure. Landscape events are aplenty everywhere, in every zone, and they happen for a reason. You help the Seraph retake a village. Great, but what are the consequences of retaking the village in a centaur-heavy region? Prepare to defend the town, and after that, take down its leader, either alone or with a whole bunch of players. It's awesome that the events are dynamic, with story layers and tiers that fits into the region's storyline seamlessly, either through the consequence of a player's actions or the story itself. In later zones, the world events directly reflects what's happening around the climax of your personal stories, ensuring that you get a well-integrated mix of events and instance personal stories. And what about the not-so-obvious content the world offers through exploration? Tyria is massive, filled with beautiful biomes that just begs the developers to insert some form of content that revolves around exploration and environment. And they've delivered. There's jumping puzzles that lead to vistas, and explorable underwater cave systems that lead to hero points. And the beauty of it all is that it is optional. Everything you do in Tyria rewards you with experience points, so it's on you to decide how you want to play. This is a masterfully crafted world filled with organic, interweaving stories, lore, and dynamic events that's just waiting for the mere presence of a player or a whole group of players to arrive before it unravels, and the result is beautiful. And the best part is there's no need to grind 40 hours a week just to experience the best of what the game has in store for you. You can start experiencing these events as early as you want. I will never tire of being a bystander or an active participant in the activities that Guild Wars 2 has to offer. And it's the world and what I'm allowed to do and what I get rewarded for doing it that will keep pulling me back in for years to come. And that wraps up my 10 reasons to play Guild Wars 2 for new players. To recap, Guild Wars 2 is a stunning MMORPG that lives up to its legacy 5 years on. It's very well rounded, offering new players a fresh way to progress in their MMOs, on top of traditional aspects we've come to expect such as PvP, dungeons, and events. The world, the stories, and the combat system are perhaps the best features of this game, and I will continue to indulge myself further in Guild Wars 2 as with the other MMOs I've covered previously to produce content that will offer you value about what's it like at level cap and at the end game. This will obviously take time, so stay tuned to the channel. And there you have it, folks. This took a lot of effort on my part, so if you enjoyed the video, it would mean a lot to me if you do give it a thumbs up, share it around, and subscribe to the channel for more MMO content. I'd also like to hear your thoughts on Guild Wars 2, so if you're a veteran of the game and think that I've missed some points, feel free to share them in the comments section below. Now that Tyria has been conquered, where am I heading to next? Well, keep an eye out for the next leveling stream. The next MMO review is going to be something different. Until then, once again, my name is GRM Adrian, and I thank you for watching. Oh, pardon me, hello there. You've reached the end screen of the video. If you'd like to subscribe to this channel and get notifications on the latest videos, click the button in the middle to subscribe to this plunker. If you'd like to watch more MMO top 10s, click the playlist to the right. For a completely random video, click the video on the left. Thank you for your kind consideration. My name is not Edward and I'm not from the UK. Goodbye.